Hi everyone, welcome back. First thing I want to do this week is apologize for the mix-up we had this last week. I must have gotten in a hurry or something, but I inadvertently put up the discussion item that we were supposed to have for this week. I put it up on last week's discussion board. So you probably found yourself reading and doing the discussions at the same time, which is really not my intent at all. What I want you to be able to do is to do the readings one week and then discuss it the next week. So I do apologize for that, and hopefully you were able to get some good out of the discussion this past week. I saw a number of good comments as I was reading through the discussion board. I do think the material we have for last week, or the discussion we were supposed to have last week, is still an important one. And if you remember, it has to do with how we stay in touch with people that are loved ones to us, family members. One of the readings and a podcast had to do with how college students and their parents stay in touch, and what are some of the changes that have happened in that area over the last number of years. And then there is another reading and clip from one of the videos, Digital Nation, I believe, called Cooking with Bubby, that deals with staying in touch across the generations, so grandparents, and for example, and how we use technology to stay in touch. So that's what our discussion will be about this next week coming up, and you may have to go back a week or so to refresh yourself on those readings and videos, etc., but that's where we'll be going this next week. Next week, our discussion will be on something called the digital divide, and that's what the videos and the reading for this coming week will be about. And let me kind of introduce that by saying I've spent most of this week at my parents' house in Milwaukee, and my parents are in their 90s, and they do have a computer, they do have the internet, but it's dial-up. I don't even know if probably most of you don't even remember dial-up, or maybe have never experienced dial-up, but certainly dial-up was the initial way in which we got in contact on the internet. It was through a phone line, and you couldn't do phone calls and have dial-up at the same time, and it was, by today's standards, it was extremely slow. And I found last week, this past week, when I was wanting to go to the discussion board for this class, that I didn't even try at their house because it's so slow. I would go out to a Starbucks or someplace and spend an hour or so there, and checking in with your comments on the discussion board and emails and things like that. So things have changed a lot in a relatively short amount of time, because it was probably 10, maybe 15 years ago that we were using dial-up all the time, and now the fast internet speeds we have through broadband and DSL and the like are something that we just really kind of take for granted. And we get frustrated, when it takes a couple of seconds for something to pop up on our computer, and we say, man, this is really slow. And and it is by today's standards, but by a few years ago it would have been pretty, anything would have been pretty fast. The digital divide, however, talks about people who don't have access to the internet at all. And as it turns out, it's a pretty significant number of people in the world that don't have access to the internet or electronic technologies. And there's even a pretty substantial number of people in the United States that don't use internet, in spite of the fact that almost everybody has access to it in one way or another. And so the sources this week have to do with this thing called the digital divide, which is the gap that exists between those that have access to information technologies like the internet and those who do not. There are a couple of short videos I want you to watch that you can connect to via the front page of the website, the D2L page, that just explain what we mean by the digital divide. And then there is a lengthier TED Talk, it's about 10 minutes or so in length, by a man named Aleph Molinari. And Molinari talks about the difference between, he talks about the digital divide on an international scale, and how here in the United States and in Europe and in westernized countries, most all of us have access to the internet, but if you go to many places in the world, there's very little access to it. And he talks about some of the things that they're doing in Mexico, where he is from, to help give people access to the internet. The other resource for this week is an article, another Pew Research article, this one by Zicker and Smith, that talks about the digital divide. It's about 3 years old, so in this day and age, things change very quickly, and so it's a little bit dated, but still pretty good in terms of describing who uses and who doesn't use the internet in the United States, and how people use it, and what sort of technologies they use to access the internet, and for those that don't use it, why. And that's the place that I'd like for us to begin this discussion this next week. All of us who are in this class have access to the internet, and pretty easy access to the internet, I would think. But it's not the same for everybody. And what does that mean for us? That's where we'll pick up the discussion next week. See you online.